All right, good morning, y'all. We're live on YouTube. We want to be live on Facebook as well. Atlanta Falcons fans on All Falcons and Scott Kennedy Sports. And once that is going, we'll be ready to go. 3, 2, 1, and welcome in, everybody. This is the Falcons Podcast. Nick Kendall, it is draft week. I'm Scott Kennedy. That's Nick Kendall. He's over in Seattle. I am in Atlanta, so we're coast to coast with your Falcons coverage today. And it's cold. It's cold here. Things are heating up this week for NFL draft, but it's cold. It's in the 40s here in Atlanta. And we've got some news. That was breaking this morning from Adam Schefter. Nothing definitive, but I think we know that there's some smoke around this, and there's going to be some fire here shortly, Nick. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we might as well just get into it. You sent it to me this morning, but there's some news from Adam Schefter that the NFL investigation into alleged tampering charges against the Falcons for their involvement with the then free agent quarterback Kirk Cousins and the Vikings for their involvement. Oh, and also the Eagles for their involvement with Saquon Barkley could reach a conclusion as early as this week, per sources. Sources believe the discipline, which is likely to involve draft picks, is expected to be more severe for the Falcons. Here are two examples of the tampering discipline in the NFL.
Yeah, and we'll get into those.
Yeah.
We've talked about the Miami Dolphins one. They lost a first and a third. Mm-hmm. And then the Chiefs in 2015 for tampering, they lost a third and a sixth. Both of those happened the year after. So even if they announce something this week, I don't expect it to be for this draft. It'd be simple. Hey, let's just take the Jaguars. Pick, their third round pick. And I think the idea of a pick swap, I don't think that works. You don't usually reward another team. That hasn't been the precedent, Nick. Yeah, You've got some meaningless fines, but they haven't rewarded. And the thought process of, I've written and discussed that the Kirk Cousins contract was actually fairly team friendly with a $25 million cap hit this year and a $40 million cap hit next year. It's actually fairly low for an average to above average starting quarterback. However, if it costs you some draft picks, price just went up, Nick.
Yeah. Yep. So I don't know. I think it's pretty silly because the tampering stuff happens regardless. And I don't know how you can really enforce that because teams are talking with players and agents in the combine before this window opens anyway, or at the Senior Bowl. So I guess, what kind of evidence is there? What's the line where tampering occurs and it's not occurring in that gray area? I would be curious to hear what the NFL would have to say about this. And I almost wonder how much the teams could push back against something like this too. What even is that legal tampering window, and how does it differ opening then compared to before when teams are talking with agents?
Which is a stupid terminology anyway, which I refuse to use. Legal tampering. That's a contact period. And again, you're talking to the agents constantly. It's like, well, sorry, I can't talk to his agent. Well, he's the agent for 4 other players on my team. I talk to him every day.
Yeah.
But we're not allowed to talk about that. Yeah, you are. It's pretty silly. Ryan's salty this morning, and I don't blame him a little bit on this one. Ryan Adonis says, sure glad we have Rich McKay on the payroll, who is on the rules committee of the NFL when we do things that are against NFL rules. Yeah, exactly. Mike Harvey says, I just came on. What's the punishment going to be? So yeah, if you're just joining us, and we'll probably repeat this a couple of times over the course of the next 45 minutes, because our numbers grow from 100 in the morning to, by the time we're done, there's over 300 people watching. So I want to make sure that they don't miss on it. But Adam Schefter today said that the punishment is expected to be announced as soon as this week for the Philadelphia Eagles, and it is expected to be more severe for the Atlanta Falcons because, of course it is. Of course it is. The old joke in the South was, what happens when the NCAA goes to Alabama to investigate Bear Bryant? Auburn goes on probation. So it's not the Eagles, it's not the Cowboys, it's the Falcons. It's the Falcons that are going to be more severe on that. But again, we'll see. Again, if it works out, if Kirk Cousins becomes the guy that they're paying him to be, you don't really care. But it's on the annoying side of things, that's for sure. And Jason says, morning, Scott, Nick, and Falcons fans. Hopefully they lose either the third or fourth next year. We need all our picks this year. Yeah, the precedent for the last two was that the punishment was the next 2 years, actually. So they both lost. The Dolphins lost 2 picks. They lost a first and a third. So they lost a 2023 for the infractions in 2022. They lost a 2023 first And then this year they lost a third rounder. And then the Chiefs, when they did it in 2015, they lost a 2016 third and then a 2017 sixth. So it was 2 picks across 2 years, the year after the infractions were supposed to have occurred. So we'll see. Shouldn't affect this year's draft. And this is a draft I don't want to lose a top 100 pick, Nick.
Yeah, it's weird because next year's class, though, Scott, is going to be massive. I've already heard people like Jim Nagy talk like we've never had the numbers that we're going to have as we have next season because the COVID stuff is coming to a close. A lot of those guys are running out of their NIL pathway as well. So I think that you don't want to lose your first round pick this year, but losing a top 100 pick next year might hurt more than this season. We'll see how it plays out, of course, because it's still a year away and things can change. It could be a worse class, but given the number of underclassmen in this class and the size of this class compared to what next year's is going to be, I think it's not crazy to think that next year's class might be better in that 50 to 120 range.
Yeah, either way, I don't want to lose any picks regardless. So again, the whole idea of tampering, it's all right. Well, how do you define that? It's the whole thing seems kind of silly. Now, here's some great news. Regardless, Joe Cannon coming in says, had to stop in real quick to say, great morning, Nick and Scott. I just got married on 4/20. Well, congratulations. Sorry, I missed it. I was at a wedding. My sister-in-law, who's basically my sister, because I've known her she's known me her whole life. She's 20 years younger than I am. She got married on 4/20 as well. So I will always remember Joe Cannon's anniversary. Happy anniversary. I hope it was awesome. I know weddings can be incredibly stressful, and it's relieving to get it over with so you can enjoy being married because the weddings are stressful. I got that question a lot. You looking forward to the wedding? I'm like, no, man. The weddings they're a pain. Looking forward to being married, and I've been married, almost 25 years now. So congratulations. It's awesome. Marriage isn't supposed to be work. It's supposed to be easy. It means you pick the right person. Kids are work. Kids are work, Nick.
Hey, yes, they are. Yes, they are. But I just can't wrap my head around the tampering stuff here. If I was in charge or if I was an owner of a team, I would be like, okay, this obviously isn't, the court of law. This isn't the American justice system where you're like required. You have the right to a jury or whatever. But like, we need definitions because the level of tampering doesn't only exist when the other team pisses and moans and it's somebody that's let go that they didn't really want to be let go. The talks like this stuff, you'd have to be completely naive to think that it's not happening considering they're going through agents and whatnot. And what's the level of evidence required? Like if a player reaches out to a team that's still under contract, is the team going to get in trouble for it? I mean, I don't know what levels, especially if you have a past relationship with somebody. How's the wife? Yeah, what are you doing this offseason? Oh, nope, now you're in trouble. We're going to get your first round pick for that. How do you even, what's the burden of proof there? I'm really curious how that could even work or play out.
Hopefully we'll get some clarity. I don't expect any on this when this comes out. They'll just say they went above and beyond, or this was more severe than what is acceptable, or the time frame, blah, blah, blah. Go out and win the whole damn major league this thing. Go out and win the whole damn thing. That's what I think of it. Coaches come in with $5 for the super chat, breaking the ice this morning, Scuds. Win the day with the coffee emoji. Certainly appreciate that, Coach. Love the support. Means a lot to us. And Edward Brown has also come in with some support over on YouTube as well. He says with his super chat, he says T-3 days and counting. It goes fast, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Thursday night. Nick, I have some news for you, but Nick is going to be joining us for some of Thursday night. I'm pretty sure when we do this live. So He doesn't know it yet, but I've got his plans made for him. Another real quick piece of news that has to do with Falcons coverage in the site. All Falcons is the website that I've owned and have kind of dabbled with. I haven't put a ton of work into it. Enough. I've been doing more on the YouTube and the podcast and stuff. But All Falcons is moving over to the Sports Illustrated domain and will be All Falcons on Fan Nation, Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation, which is a group that I've worked with in the past and helped put together. I'm really excited about it, which will mean full-time coverage for the Atlanta Falcons from me and my team, etc. Lead writer Daniel Flick has been there. He has agreed to join All Falcons, and he will not be going anywhere. He's excited. I'm excited. So we're going to have a lot more Falcons coverage on the website side of things at allfalcons.com. So a little bit of news there. Just in time for the NFL draft. I'm pretty psyched. I actually wrote up this article this morning already. It's just one of the reasons I'm harried already today. One final piece of business. If it weren't for Lion Coffee, I don't know how we'd be getting through this morning when we're all panicked and harried and trying to get the kids out of school and get ready and write this up and change diapers and all that kind of stuff. So a big thanks to Lion Coffee for keeping us caffeinated. I want to remind you that they are a partner of the podcast, lioncoffee.com. You can see more roar in every pore. And you can use the Go Falcons 20 code to get 20% off of your order, off everything there except 100% Kona and Cases. Everything else is good to go, including the one I'm drinking right now, Richens SD Cafe Honolulu. It's a medium dark that I absolutely love. So, Nick, thank you to Lion Coffee as well. Go Falcons 20.
Yeah, love Lion Coffee. Shout out to you, Patrick, for supporting us in Lion Coffee. And it's not been a bad perk of these morning shows. I mean, I'm up at 4:30 a.m. to get going for these shows. And without Lion Coffee, I don't know if I would be putting together any sentences. So God bless.
Exactly. So thank you for that. You give them a try. We promise you, if you're a coffee lover like us, you'll love Lion Coffee and you can get 20% off as well. Keith Robbins coming in with this with the stars over on Facebook. So thank you, sir. Certainly appreciate that. And Keith and Ellen Johnson has come in with some stars as well. Thank you for the support. Keith Robbins, I missed you in the shout outs last week. I apologize for that. We see your support, even if I don't see it live. It's a little bit tougher when I'm by myself. Keith and Ellen Johnson says, good morning. Draft week. Excited to see who the Falcons pick up. Absolutely. One of the other things we want to get into is some of the speculation surrounding the NFL draft today, and not just the tampering news. Jordan Reed released a 7-round mock draft, Nick, that included a trade down for the Atlanta Falcons, which we've speculated for months now that it just makes sense based on the players that are available and them trading down. So he's got the Falcons trading down. Now, I want to ask you, Nick, is this enough? Is this enough to go from 8 to 11? The Minnesota Vikings trade up to 8, and J.J. McCarthy falls in their laps. I don't know that J.J. McCarthy is going to be there at 8, but nevertheless, is going from 8 to 11 for 2/4 enough? Is that enough for 2 4th-round picks in this draft?
Probably not, because I think the Broncos would be on the phone and willing to give up even more to move up for JJ McCarthy. If the cost is just 2/4 for a quarterback, if we're talking like, one of the wide receivers or like an offensive tackle or the first defensive prospect in the class, I think it's a little bit more feasible that it's just 2/4. I think that's still a little low, but when you toss in the JJ McCarthy aspect of it with the Broncos, with the Seahawks, with the Saints, with the Raiders, with the Rams, all these, like the Cowboys, some dark horse teams here for quarterback as well. If all it costs is 2/4, I mean, let's say you're moving down instead of to 11, you're moving down to 20 or something. What is that? Just a third, a third and fourth, a second
Basically
and fourth
a third.
there? Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think that is actually selling it pretty low. I think if you could probably get at least a 3rd-round pick in that as well to move down. So if you can 8 to 11 and get a 3rd and a future 3rd, I think that's a little bit more feasible in my opinion. But yeah, the 2/4, I don't think that is enough.
I agree. I look at it too, and I agree. You look at the players that you end up getting. When you start thinking about players, you start kind of raising your eyebrows a little bit. You're like, okay, well, when I put a player with, that I like into this mix, rather than just, I don't want 109, because that's what the draft is. And it's the lead on ESPN. If you go to ESPN team NFL, Jordan Reed's mock draft is the lead in there, but he's got the Vikings get 8, after tampering and we get in trouble for it. We're going to do a deal with you guys. And the Falcons get number 11. So they move to 11. They get 108 and 129. So with number 11, the Falcons take Leatu Latu in Jordan Reed's mock draft. So he's got them ahead. He's got him ahead of Jared Verse, I believe. Yeah, he's got Jared Verse going at 19. So he's got Leatu Latu going off at number 11. He's got Dallas Turner going to the Bears at 9. He says a strong argument could be made that Latu is the best pure pass rusher in the class. Okay, well, that'd be nice. And then at 109, the Falcons end up taking Tavondre Sweat, who I took he took at 108. So maybe he's got this mixed up a little bit. It's what I do. It's 108. They get defensive tackle Tavondre Sweat in the 4th. I think I took him in the 5th in the mock I did on Friday. I'm like, I'm willing to take a chance on a guy with character concerns in the 5th round, Nick. That's a high second. That's a top 50 prospect. At 108, you get Tavondre Sweat. And at 129, the Falcons take offensive guard Zach Zinter out of Michigan. So when you start thinking of it that way, is the number 8 pick, who could be Dallas Turner, could be Jared Verse, could be Terry Arnold, could be JJ McCarthy. If you wanted your 21-year-old quarterback of the future, is that worth Laiatu Latu, guard Zach Zinter, and defensive tackle / nose guard Tavondre Sweat when you start thinking about it like that? You're muted.
I still don't think it's the return on investment.
Okay, you're back now.
I froze for a second. Yeah, my internet went bloop, and now I'm back. So that's good. It's the Lion Coffee just kicking in on my internet as well. But yeah, it's still, it's good to get those players, especially, fill out some more rookie contracts if you might be losing picks for 2025 as well. So maybe start to add to that war chest by moving down a tad. But I think that you probably still need more value for that pick. With Denver still there lurking, I can't imagine you can't at least get 2/3 rather than 2/4 for it.
Yeah, it's tough. So I just don't think it's enough. Leaf says, morning, you lot. If we move back for 2/4, I'm buying a Saints jersey. It doesn't seem like enough for me. And it seems like whenever the Falcons are involved in these trades, they're always getting robbed. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I also know the facts of the media business. And the Atlanta Falcons are not a large media market, et cetera, et cetera. Mike Harvey coming in with a super chat. Thank you, my friend. He says, we should go all in on this draft. Both of our 3s and next year's 1 for Cincinnati's pick at 18. That's expensive, dude. Edge Turner, 2nd round, 1st. Quinyon Mitchell. So, all right. So we're saying, I think you can do that. I think you can.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll be that expensive. Next year's first, I think you could package together this year's 2nd. Of course, he wants this year's 2nd also, is what he's saying. He wants all of the picks this year to make the team as good as possible right now. I don't want to give up next year's 1st. I don't want to give up next year's 1st round pick. But if you package together in some way or form those 3 day 2 picks, I think you can get back into the 1st and get edge corner edge. We've done it before in our mock drafts.
I think it'd be hard to get up to 18 though. 18 is still pretty high. You might be able to get to like 28, but 18 right smack dab in the middle. I actually think it is expensive, but I do think it would take something around this kind of package to do it, to get up to 18, to get in the top 20. You still have day 1 graded players there. A lot of times you see people trade up into the back end of the 1st round and it's your 1/2 grades.
Well, let's just pretend we're trading with the Falcons and we can throw in a 5th and that'll get it done. Because that's the kind of deals that the Falcons seem to make in these mock drafts.
To be fair to Reed, he also kind of shortchanged the Broncos in this one as well, where you had them trade down 10 spots and they end up getting a 2nd round pick, but then a 5th round pick, where Denver traded back 10 spots back in 2019 and they got a 2nd round pick and a future 3rd, which is obviously way more valuable. So I think both trade backs were a little undersold a tad. Not as much as the Falcons with the quarterback on the board, but
2/4. We see some. That was kind of similar to the Justin Fields trade not that long ago. What, they go up to 9 to get Justin Fields, or 11 or something? They moved up 6 spots and picked up a future 1st and another pick.
I feel like they went up to like 13 or 14, but
it wasn't a ton. It wasn't, it wasn't a number 8.
No, it wasn't number 8, and the Giants gave up a future 1st, but that was a quarterback involved. So I think it would be much more expensive than 2/4. But you never know. James Durecco coming in here, great beard, James. Jealous of the facial hair game there. Says if Minnesota wants number 8, then it's going to cost them 11 and 23. If I'm Atlanta, I'm throwing in a 4th. If that's what it took to get done. I don't think you're going to get 2 firsts for 8. That's a little extra in my opinion, but I would be at least asking for 2/3 from them in this scenario. But hey man, it doesn't hurt to ask for sure. 11 and 23 would be great to get. I think 11 and 23 is more in the conversation if you're trading up to 3 or 4 rather than 3 spots to 8. I do agree. I mean, even though it's only 3 spots, the delineation of talent and the ability to get quarterback should skyrocket that a lot. So I think that the 2/4's not there, but 11 and 23, yeah, you overshot me on that one, James, a little bit.
Yeah, the problem is 10, 11, and 12 don't have a second round pick. So okay,
It's future picks,
first if you want this spot. Otherwise, we're going to stay here and you guys can battle it out. Oh, and by the way, I've got the Raiders on the phone. They're offering me a future first. You know, there's a bidding war that could happen there that could get a little crazy. But again, at 11 in this mock, the Falcons take Latu. Okay, we understand that. We might go Jared Verse. We might go Terrion Arnold. There's going to be several good players you can get in here. If you wanted to get offensive tackle, there's several there. Talise Fuaga, Olufushanu is still there. Wide receiver Brian Thomas. I'm not on that one. J.C. Latham still on the board. Quinyon Mitchell's still on the board. So there's a lot of really good players there, which is why we've talked about why it makes a lot of sense to move into just down a few spots. It's going to cost you more than a couple of fourths. So at 43, Jordan Reed has the Falcons taking cornerback. Is it Enes Rakestraw, cornerback out of Missouri? And yes, if he's the right player, I don't know that he is, but it's one of the right positions. Cornerback or wide receiver in round 2 makes a lot of sense to me in this draft. The Falcons also need a starting safety. Safety, cornerback 2, wide receiver 2, edge 1. Those are the 4 biggest needs, in my opinion. And then offensive tackle is also a sneaky need if you've got the right guy there for you, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, either way, you can let it fall to you. I think Rakestraw is, I don't know. I watched his tape and he's really competitive, but I don't know if he's got the athletic juice to stick at cornerback. He might be somebody who I think moves to safety at the end of the day. I don't love him totally, but I really don't love a lot of the day 2 or the round 2 cornerback ranges in this draft class right now. Could be wrong, obviously, but Rakestraw makes some sense. I just don't know if you're looking for cornerback, I don't know if he actually ends up making it there. I don't love all the value of the cornerback class. Victor Rios coming in, my guys. I'm here for the draft talk. Well, we got plenty of that the last Monday before the NFL draft, so that's fun. Jordan Brown, what did Houston do to move up to number 3 last year? They gave up, what was it, pick 6?
I don't remember, because they traded down and then they traded back up. And it was pretty expensive, but Will Anderson was worth it.
I think they went from, granted, there's a huge logarithmic decay in terms of the value the further you get from pick number 1. So like moving up from 3 to 6 is probably more similar to moving up. Like if the Falcons move from 8 to 18, that's probably closer to the 3 to 6 difference. But they gave up, I think the Texans moved up to number 3 and they gave up pick 6 overall, which ended up being Paris Johnson, and the 2024 first round pick. So it was a lot. But you're probably looking it up. I know they gave up.
No, what I'm looking up right now is because I wanted to know for sure was the Giants and Justin Fields. Okay. So they went from 20 to number 11. So they sent them 20 and a 5th and a 1st and a 4th to move up from 20 to 11. So a 1st, a 5th, and a 4th. On top of the extra 1st. So basically 2 firsts. In this case, we're talking a 1st and 2 4ths versus 2 firsts and a 5th and a 4th. I'm not going down for 2 4th round picks. Even I know it was 20 to 11, but it's also up to 8. And you just talked about that logarithmic decay, that exponential curve. The higher you go, the steeper that curve gets, the more expensive it is to move up just a few spots. So getting up to number 8 is going to cost you a lot more than that.
Hey, Scott, ring, 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 ring. Hey, this is Sean Payton here. You like pick 11? How about pick 12 and we'll give you a 4th round pick this year and a 2nd round pick next year. Screw their 2 4ths. We're going to give you a 2nd as well. Heck, we'll even give you a 4th next year. Send us a 6th as well.
They're talking about Denver tossing in 2 firsts and Pat Surtain to get up and take J.J. McCarthy. Mean, that's at 4. That's at 3 or 4. But McCarthy's on the board at 8. You're in a good spot. And a much better spot than 2 4ths. That's the point I've got here. I'm going to go back up to Ryan Adonis here real quick. Or it was Rusty. I can't remember which. It was Ryan or Rusty. Apologies. It was probably Rusty. Just talking about, I hope the Michael Penix Jr. Talk isn't true. So Penix Jr., we actually put that on this site yesterday, on allfalcons.com. Daniel Flick wrote it up. about there's just a lot of smoke around Atlanta Falcons and Michael Penix. Now, I want there to be smoke around Michael Penix if I want to trade down. I want as many quarterbacks available as possible if I want to trade down. Now, they've done, would I fly out to Washington for 2 separate occasions, including a private workout with Michael Penix if I wasn't interested? That said, I'll be shocked, and I've said it before, and I will still say it again. I will be shocked if the Atlanta Falcons use one of their first 2 picks on a quarterback. Shocked. Number 43 in this mock draft, Rakestraw goes to the Falcons, cornerback. Number 44 to the Las Vegas Raiders, Michael Penix Jr., quarterback, Washington, goes to the Raiders. I don't see it. I don't see it. And Make You Fumble, start on this one. It says, not understanding why you take a pick for next year's drafts, because you get a premium on it. And if you can wait it out, it's worth it. It's worth it. Would I rather have 2 fourths this year, or would I rather have Denver's second next year, which is probably going to be a top 40 pick? I'd rather have the second next year.
And the other aspect is you have how many picks this year already in the top 100? You don't want 30 players. That's obviously an exaggeration, but all hitting free agency at the same time. You like to be able to stagger guys in draft classes. It's something that, honestly, one of the most underrated aspects of that Patriots dynasty is they continuously were picking in the 20 to 30 range, and they are moving back 10 to 15 slots and picking up a lot of day 2 capital and future draft picks. And those future draft picks, if you are a stable franchise, there's as you mentioned, a premium on it, but it's an investment that no matter what is getting more expensive. Like this season, if you trade a number 2 in 2024, the value on that is a number 1 in 2025 a lot of times. And if you have the ability to sit there and wait it out, it's like buying a stock, right? Like if you have the ability to, if you have security, it's going to go up in value. So that's one thing that, trading, we know there's a market deficiency it depends on which way you're going, but like teams now know that like if you're trading back, a lot of times the teams trading back are getting a lot more value than the teams trading up. We have this data on that. We have the studies. Teams know this. It's why that you're not seeing as many trades for non-quarterbacks happening, because they've done the analytics data. It's like, wow, a lot of times this doesn't work out when you're trading up for non-quarterbacks. Now I think the next area, and I've been a proponent of for years, and Eric always makes fun of me for it, but like if I'm trading back, I'm trying to get I'd rather get a 3rd round pick next year than a 4th round pick next year. Easy for me to say my job is not on the line, but you get better value on the future pick. So that's what I'm about. And
to help emphasize this point for Nick, you've got a new coach. Raheem's got basically a 3-year runway. He can afford, instead of taking a 5th in this year's draft, okay, we'll give you a 3rd next year. Okay, I can wait. I can wait to pick up, 60 spots in the draft next year. So that's why. It's because there's interest on it, basically.
Yep,
if you're going to offer me a 4th, I don't want your 4th this year, but give me your 3rd next year. Okay. And by the way, I think you're going to stink. Your 3rd's going to be pick 70.
And you already have
100 this year.
What do you have? 4 or 5 top 100 picks this year already? You really, it's a good thing if you have too many players hit free agency at once. That means that comp pick games coming back and you've had a good, young, healthy roster. But to be able to stagger those contracts a little bit as well is a good move, and to give yourself flexibility over years. Also, we talked about it at the top of the show. You might be losing picks next year because of the tampering stuff. So the ability to supplement those picks that you might be losing is not a bad way to just, fill out the depth chart a little bit next season and protect yourself.
Jordan talking about flying out to watch Penix throw. He says, I'd fly out to Washington twice to see Penix throw to Adunze. He didn't throw to Adunze on his private workout with the Falcons, though. He had Jalen Polk was with him. It was a Penix workout. It wasn't a sneaky, let's get a look at Adunze too, see if we can tamper there and not use a pick. It wasn't that. It was a Michael Penix visit, and that's a long way to go. And the report was that they didn't stay and like take him to dinner. It wasn't a meet and greet. It was, we're going to watch him throw. And this is the 2nd time out there to Washington. And I want you to see him. I want you to see him. I want you to see him. And then come on home. They flew out to Washington. They flew home. So very interesting. Troy Green says, how live are we? We're right at the 30-minute mark, Troy. And like I said, we've probably doubled our viewership since the first 10 minutes of the show. So just kind of want to go over the headline. That Adam Schefter has reported that he expects the Atlanta Falcons punishment for tampering in the signing of Kirk Cousins to be more severe than what the Philadelphia Eagles are going to get for Saquon Barkley. The more recent punishment for tampering was a 1st and a 3rd but that was pretty egregious if you're going to be talking about tampering for the Miami Dolphins, that it was contacting a head coach and Tom Brady 3 separate times when you weren't supposed to. And that was also part of a racial discrimination lawsuit from Brian Flores. I don't expect it to be that. The Chiefs were punished, and they gave up a next year. So this would start next year, a third and a sixth, I think, in consecutive years. So if that happens, if the Falcons are punished, I think more Chiefs than Dolphins on that one.
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with you on that. So, well, again, I just can't get my head around how do you actually prove something like this? Like, what is the letter of the law? Is it just, oh, that's a first round pick for next year? What's the wind say? Let me read my tarot cards or something. I don't know. But it just seems so flimsy. Like, we need something. If I was a owner of the Falcons, if I was Arthur Blank, I'm like, what is concrete here? That the precedent and everything. There has to be some level of replicability. I don't know, like something like letter of the law. What is it?
We need a standard. We need a precedent.
That's the word. Yep.
We need a precedent on this. And again, I don't think, as Leaf says, being more severe than the Eagles doesn't mean it's going to be anywhere near the Dolphins. No, and I don't expect it to be near the Dolphins, a first and a third. But what I said is like, oh, well, we'll just offer the pick swap and it'll go away. Hell no. No, if I don't think I've done anything wrong, I'm not taking a plea deal. And in these cases, the teams where those free agents left, they weren't compensated for it. So the Vikings don't get anything out of this. We mentioned last week, does Mike Florio, is he getting one-sided information? Yes, he is. He is biased by the Minnesota Vikings. That doesn't mean he's wrong. And the information coming out, starting to feel like the Atlanta Falcons are going to get at least a slap on the wrist from the NFL. And, there'll be fines involved. I didn't even write it up as fines. I'm like, I'm not going to write it. The fines involved on this is a drop in the bucket for these ownerships and such. So, and as Maurice says, the NFL doesn't have to prove anything. It's not a corner of law. They just punish people. Yeah, but they do work for the owners. Goodell is a employee of the owners. So it's basically a voluntary agreement with all of these guys in here, the Billionaire Boys Club, doing these types of things. So, getting back to, I'm watching y'all's comments coming in, et cetera. And I also wanted to talk about the number 2 pick from Jordan Reed's mock draft was a cornerback. And then the next pick was Michael Penix. We hit on that in the smoke around Michael Penix. And then just a little bit after that was edge, Marshawn Nealon. You had safety, Jaden Hicks, cornerback, TJ Tampa, wide receivers, Troy Franklin, Jalen Polk, Chris Braswell, edge, Roman Wilson, wide receiver, corner, Max Milton. This is why I want another second-round pick, Nick. I mean, if you like Rakestraw, okay. I like just about every one of those players, though. And I don't know as much about Rakestraw, so I'm not going to talk down about him. But I know I can get a player that I can pretty much pencil into the starting lineup from those next 10 picks up into the 50s except for Penix, and that's okay if you're quarterback of the future. A developmental quarterback is okay. But there's some really, really good players I just named after the Falcons pick of Rakestraw.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good options there. I like DJ Tampa a little bit more. I think I also like Andrew Phillips a little bit more than Rakestraw, and the value of Max Melton a little bit lower.
How about this one? Michael Hall to the Browns at 54 and Braden Fisk to the Dolphins at 55. I took Fisk with my pick last week at the 43. I took Fisk.
I like Fisk a lot. I wish he was longer. That's my biggest complaint. He's a little bit, T-Rex armed, but a good option there as well. I know you're not really at issues there at the slot, but like one of my favorite players in the entire draft is Mike Santra still, who's a slot only guy, but just like super smart, competitive. And if you're playing nickel base, he's going to be out there a lot. So again, I'm just not as big of a fan of Enos Rakestraw. On the whole, I think he's fine. But yeah, it's a lot of options there. Just don't love the cornerback class as much. I mean, I know that you need corner, But after, the top 2 to 5 guys, I think it falls off a tad.
So at number 74 with the 3rd round pick, the first of them, he's got the Atlanta Falcons taking defensive tackle Brandon Dorless out of Oregon. Not for me. Not for me. I watched him at the Senior Bowl. There are a lot of other directions based on, again, it is a small sample size, but there's other directions I would go other than Brandon Dorless at defensive tackle, including at number 76 to the Denver Broncos, Andrew Phillips, cornerback, Kentucky, Bernardo Green to the Raiders at 77, cornerback, Florida State. You've got Peyton Wilson, linebacker, wouldn't be an awful pick. At number 81, if you need a backup tight end, another tight end, Ben Sinnott, tight end, Kansas State. I like all those guys better than Brandon Dorless. And then at 79, this is the Calvin Ridley pick. They take Devontae Walker, who is toolsy as hell, but he had a rough first day or two at the Senior Bowl, and that probably knocked his stock down at least a round, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, really good athlete, down the field player, just inconsistent. It was pretty awesome to see him. He transferred the NCAA and North Carolina went back and forth about getting him.
The National Coalition Against Athletes.
Yep. They had a real hard time. I don't know if you remember, North Carolina released a scathing letter about the NCAA because he transferred close to North Carolina to be closer to his dying grandmother, I believe is what it was. And they're like, nope, sorry, you can't do that, even though they let everything else go.
Yeah, I don't care why you're transferring.
Yeah.
Let them transfer.
Yep. I don't mind it either. I do think that maybe if you transfer like 2 times in 2 years, maybe you have to sit out some level of games. I think they're probably it can't just be the, week by week entering the transfer portal kind of thing. There has to be like some, what needs to happen is they need to sign contracts with the teams. And then it's like, okay, you're here for 2 years. You signed a contract. Here you are. But
you're paying them. So, and I had that discussion at the wedding, sitting down with a mom of a former athlete. She's like, I don't really like this. And I was like, all right. And I went off like I tend to do sometimes. She's like, you've opened my eyes to this stuff. I'm like, the money's there. Might as well go to the players, because she had a son that was a baseball player, turned down some money, gets kind of abused as a pitcher in college, and then never really made it back into where he wanted to be. Yep. I'm like, wouldn't it have been nice to be able to put $100,000 in your pocket and go to the college that you wanted to? That'd be nice.
Yeah, we can't pay the players, but we have individual jacuzzis in every single locker stall. Yeah.
Look, squirrel.
Yeah,
I've told you that story. I was at a camp, and it was a really high camp called The Opening with the top 100 players in the country. And that was like, oh, the facilities there were amazing. This, blah, 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 the bells and whistles. I said, yeah, you can do that stuff when you don't have to pay your employees. He came up to me like an hour later. He's like, I've been thinking about that. You're right. I'm like, I know. I know. It's the bells and whistles and the ice cream machine to blind you over the fact that they're making billions of dollars off of your blood, sweat, and tears out there. Pamela has a question. She says, I have a question for both of you, Nick. You and Nick, who's your late round gem in the draft for the Atlanta Falcons? I've got a lot of these, Nick, but some of them seem to be rising up. My guy was Roger Rosengarten, and he's probably not going to make it out of top 50 now. He was in the 150s. He's an offensive tackle from the University of Washington that I really liked, and I've seen him mocked in the first round now. Tanner Bortolini, a center prospect. He's jumped up about 100 spots in PFS rankings. A nice early day 3 guy, possibly 4th round center, athletic as hell. So there's a lot of them, Pamela.
Yeah, there's a lot of different options there. I think maybe somebody like a Luke McCaffrey, 5th round player, projected to go 5th. He's somebody who could be a pretty interesting one. I think that the running backs are really deep this season. I know that you're fine at running back, but what do you have 2 years left with Algier? Maybe you take a shot at somebody who slips a tad. I know that some teams, a really interesting player, totally only 1 year at running back, a little bit older, but just the way he moves is fun, is a Tyron Tracy from Purdue. I think he's a late round sleeper that you should keep an eye on as well. Really stood out at the Shrine Bowl. He's a little bit of a wide receiver running back hybrid, but teams love those kind of guys if you can get them late, especially. So those are some names that stand out to me. And we got Anthony Evans coming that says Xavier Leggett reminds me of Deebo Samuel. Leggett's weird because he's had a really late breakout age, was mostly just a special teams guy, and this season really stood out. A lot of his routes are, crossers and build-up stuff, but he's a legit athlete out there. I think he had a really good combine. He's massive. I think he's not as true like running back to wide receiver body type as you see a Malachi Corley. I wonder if some of the Leggett reminded you of Samuel as the Jersey stuff there. Anthony, considering they're both Cox, South Carolina players. But yeah, he's one that really interesting profile. The athleticism, though, alone and the production this season, even though he's older, late breakout age, probably gets him in round 3.
There's a lot of guys in there. As far as going back to Pamela's too, what I started doing was I went back down to the and I like the Deebo Samuel, the Cordero Patterson comparisons for Leggett. Big jumbo run after the catch. Jonathan Mingo was that guy for me last year, 2nd round pick of the Panthers. Didn't do a whole lot this year, so we will see. But going back to Pamela's, I went back and I'm looking at now who's Jordan Reed projecting, 5th round or so or later. And you start looking at some of those guys, and I see my guy, Johnny Wilson, 6'6", 240 pounds, a wide receiver in the 5th round of the Denver Broncos. He's got the Atlanta Falcons taking Michael Pratt, quarterback out of Tulane, for your 3rd quarterback, whatever. To me, Michael Pratt's a career clipboard holder in the NFL. And if you want to use a 5th rounder on that, so be it. Doesn't do a whole lot for me, honestly. And then he's actually got the Broncos taking another one of the late round picks I got. 290-pound defensive lineman Justin Aboigbe out of Alabama, I really like. We'll see how far. Where does he have our guy Theo going? Because let me see where he's got him going, because that's one of the guys. Theo Johnson, this is getting silly, Nick. 121 to the Denver Broncos. I just said 3 straight guys to the Denver Broncos as far as guys that I like that Jordan Reed has picked late. So lots of really good players in there. Dave has a good question that I like. He says, do you think the NFL will start treating wide receivers? You actually redid that one because I did figure out what you wrote. I was like, war. Like they do running backs. I do not think the Vikings want to pay Jefferson. No, I don't think so. I think you will be able to spin Justin Jefferson off for multiple 1st-round picks. You couldn't do that for a running back. Just because a team doesn't want to pay the wide receiver doesn't mean another team won't. You have that problem with running backs. Nobody wants to pay running backs a 2nd contract. There's always somebody out there that wants to pay wide receivers a 2nd contract. When Calvin Ridley's getting $25 million guaranteed, when Jerry Jeudy's getting $20 million guaranteed, somebody is going to pay Justin Jefferson, and they're going to give up at least a 1st-rounder to do it if the Vikings decide to deal.
I mean, look at what the free agent market says for the wide receiver position. The good guys don't hit the market, and the 2nd or 3rd tier ones get paid huge contracts. Even though there's a lot coming in, there still isn't enough. Teams are wanting 3 or 4 of them versus 1 or 2 running backs. So I can't imagine them starting to look like running backs. Now, are we reaching a point where teams have really expensive quarterbacks and then can't keep really expensive wide receivers? That's a conversation. That's a little different, how the team building is there. Like a lot of these highly paid wide receivers getting shipped to teams with rookie quarterback contracts. We can keep an eye on that. But as far as actual running backs, it's not close. I think if anything, even though there's a lot of good wide receivers coming out, the value of wide receivers compared to cap keeps going up. So, I mean, if anything, I think that, you could argue with me, Scott, but I think difference maker as a pass catcher might be the 3rd most valued position on a football team right now after your premium pass rusher. I know there's scarcity at tackle, but a true difference maker at wide receiver is being paid more than a true difference maker at offensive tackle.
Yeah, it used to be the left tackle was the 2nd highest paid guy in football. Now I think it's your edge rusher.
Edge, pass, defensive tackle too, if they're that guy. But yes.
But as far as the position goes, edge, there's more of those 20 million plus edges than there are the defensive tackles, because the guys that move like that are they're at 300 pounds are pretty crazy, which is another thing I wanted to get to. For the other part of the Adam Schefter note that dealt with the Atlanta Falcons, was a sneaky guy to get into the top 10 was Byron Murphy, was the defensive tackle that they're talking about. Does Raheem Morris, can he see his Aaron Donald guy here long-term for his defense for the Atlanta Falcons, keep an eye on Byron Murphy. Now, what would your reaction be? The Atlanta Falcons are on the clock. They have decided to take defensive tackle Byron Murphy out of the University of Texas for the number 8 pick in this year's draft. What would your reaction be?
I think he's got a chance to be the best defensive player in this draft class. Now, there's a caveat to that because it's not the best defensive class, but he is really young. His ability to, despite his size, be a absolute beast in the run game and anchor. I mean, he has a weird technique where he'll drop down to his knees, and the flexibility and the leverage that he can get from that and the power and then pop back up and make the play is a technique. I can't even think of many players in the NFL that has done that, but it works for him.
He had to have wrestled.
It's pretty, must have.
He had to have wrestled. I mean, that's a position you start in as a wrestler.
Yeah.
You know, the down position is on all fours, and then you get points for escaping it. He had to have wrestled.
Yeah, he's something else. It shocks me how much A gap usage he had last season too, despite being, 290-ish pounds. So I want to see him be able to be a little bit more freed up to get some one-on-ones in the NFL where he can play some more 3 technique stuff. And he is tenacious as a pass rusher. I mean, I remember coming out of that the Washington game this season, the college football semifinals, where I was taking Byron Murphy in the 3rd round in mocks. I'm like, why the hell is Johnny Newton getting first round love, but you get Byron Murphy this late? Obviously,
that has corrected itself.
Yes, it typically does. It's like, oh man,
with enough
such a steal.
It's like, Dave. Dave, I think, came in. He said, Scott, you and Pete Prisco would have an interesting conversation about Michael Pratt. It wouldn't be that interesting, honestly. I mean, I'm assuming you think that Pete Prisco really likes Michael Pratt. That's fine. I wouldn't argue with him. I would state what I think, because I'm not going to tell him he's wrong. There's the future coming. What I think is Michael Pratt does not have the tools to be an NFL quarterback. I'm not right. Not yet. And if you're going to bet on failure, unfortunately, because the odds are drastically in my favor if I think Michael Pratt is not going to succeed. That's just the nature of the business. So, but I wouldn't argue with him or tell him he's out of his mind. It's just what I think. I don't think Michael Pratt has the tools to be an NFL quarterback. Love to be wrong. Nothing against the kid. I don't mind being wrong. I root for players. I'm not rooting against them.
Yeah. We will CSC Gregory asks, what's the chance to see a cornerback at 8? I think there's a slight chance you see a cornerback at 8 with Kenyon Mitchell. I think cornerback kind of falls off a tad after those top 2. It'd be better if you could move back a little bit. And then you got T-Baby come in and says, what if the Falcons trade 8 to 11 to the Vikings for 11 and 23? Draft a guy at 11, then trade back 23 for Justin Jefferson. Yeah, I don't see that happening. Justin Jefferson's going to take probably 3 first-round picks. I think
he'd take at least your 2025 number 1 too.
He's probably the second, maybe the 3rd most valuable non-quarterback in the NFL, behind 2 pass rushers. And
so you got Myles Garrett and who?
Probably Micah Parsons next to, because he's so young.
I think just based on this could be a whole. These are the kind of things we'll talk all summer. I think you could get more for Justin Jefferson than Micah Parsons just for the attitude. Honestly,
Jefferson's had injuries though,
and
he played. That's a little older. I think I'd probably say Micah Parsons first, but you're right. It's a conversation there with them. But if you're doing a league redraft of the entire league and took out quarterbacks, he'd be one of the first for sure 5 players off the board. And he would cost way more than 23 to get. I mean, heck, I think that's maybe even one of the hangups there with the Patriots there at number 3. It's like, oh, you want to come up to Vikings? You want to come up? Give us Justin Jefferson in 23, and we can talk. Honestly, all the reports are coming. Robert Kraft is head over heels wanting a quarterback this cycle, and he doesn't want to give up number 3 unless they can move back up and get McCarthy as well. So we'll see. The ups and downs are going to be interesting. Maurice comes in as we start to wrap it on up. I don't know if we're going to get a mock draft in today, Scott.
No, we do those on Wednesdays. We have a little bit more time.
Okay. He says, where are you on
Chop Robinson? This is a news day. This ended up being a news day on Monday.
Yeah, Chop Robinson's my 4th edge rusher. Super toolsy. I wish he was a little bit more productive at the college level, but he is somebody who trusts the traits, and he was just unbelievably fast, explosive. Some of how fast he wins. I'd be curious to look at a study for this, Scott, but like the time to pressure on when he does get pressures is got to be some of the fastest in the league, just how quickly he wins his rep. So he's got to develop a little bit more in terms of the skills. But he is somebody who has the tools that you bet on as a wide 9 rusher. So it's probably going to go somewhere and pick 20 to 28 and be that speed and the ankle flexion is going to translate.
So Chop Robinson's one of those guys. If the Falcons do trade down, and let's say the edge ends up going 9, Dallas Turner, let's say they make that trade with the Minnesota Vikings, then someone takes Jared Verse and they don't, or Latu, and they don't like the other guy. So you go cornerback there. I could go corner there. I could go Terran Arnold. I could go Quinyon Mitchell. I could go offensive tackle. I could. And then if I don't get my edge there, Chop's a guy we've talked about coming back into the back end of the first round to get. So I would love for the Atlanta Falcons to come out of this draft with their first 2 picks being 2 of the 3, corner, edge, wide receiver. I think that's the needs. I think that's the depth. Wide receiver to me is more of, this is such a good wide receiver class, I don't want to miss on one, than it is a big need for the Atlanta Falcons. It's just, if I look in the second round and start ripping off these names, I'm like Ladd McConkey, Roman Wilson, Ricky Pearsall, Xavier Legette, Malachi Corley. Yes, please. One of those guys. Yes. Would love to have one of those guys. But as far as the need goes, edge and corner are probably the bigger need for the Atlanta Falcons if it matches up with your board.
Yep, I am with you 100%. And I mean, how many shows have we done where Odunze or neighbor has been there and people are saying, you got to take the pass rusher. I'm like, no, you don't. I got to take the guy that I value higher. And those are the
Malik Neighbors fell to me, and I said I was trading down before I started the draft. And Ryan came in. He's like, you don't pass on Neighbors there. And I'm like, no, I probably wouldn't have. But I'd already said I was going to trade down just to see what it would look like. And if Malik Neighbors is there at 8, you're probably going to take a wide receiver. We are going to get out of here, y'all. Real quick, DP 1030. Nick and I are about to go and do Broncos for breakfast. It's youtube.com/Mile High Huddle. I promise you we will talk Bo Nix and JJ McCarthy, and I would love to get into this question with you on the next podcast. So he asked, why does JJ McCarthy jumped up on these mock drafts but not Bo Nix? Am I missing something? We can get into that, but we got to go. First off, I want to say thanks to Lion Coffee for coming in and being a partner of the Falcons podcast. I want to say thank you to Coach for kicking us off. I want to say thank you to Edward Brown for the super chat. The Keiths, Keith Robbins, Keith and Ellen Johnson with the stars over on Facebook, and Mike Harvey as well. And I want to thank all of you for joining us. If Monday is now in the books, that means we've got Wednesday's show, and then we got Thursday time for draft, and we can finally put rubber to the road on this stuff. Thanks for being here. Dave, glad you're here. Leave us a comment. We'll come back and check it in. So thanks, y'all. Appreciate you being here. We will be back on Wednesday at 8:30. If you've got any questions or comments, leave them in the comments, and we'll get to them. Until then, we'll see you next time.
Peace.